땡중 사디 셰바chen 균제기 땡중로 네바토베 거네 아니 문도 다 문도 가자다 단주다 년도 니체에 딱 년도를 기하게 레디에 또 아니 년도를 기하게 레다 미기주디 도면도 자네 까르보게 어 주세 차버래 대대비 까르보 기주 아니 람나 아니 문들이 좀 톡톡그레스 진전대비다 문도 주지게 더 미기 주분 그 추림 대니 교상볼래 저부상보 교년발래 저부년바사디디 렌제게 남샤다 상거도야 균제게 남샤 차시 차여가는 말래 윤데 다지 아니 나랑서라 신도 고규래 지리니 셰자라 내 숨세네 통문주 중세 고규 신도 고규 송도와 신도 고규 써야돼 강사 수버직을 나는 때네 다 셰야마도 믿어가 남중에디 셰되게 배나 소소소 계세디 아멘알아 아마도 속베다 가다 대지 대뒤 내주디 유용의 지금 나는 때나마도 소수 셰야 봐 그러나 지지 집에는 너도 제가 가자 저 좋을 기회를 제버리 但没想到个老师不得恰恰就死过了嘛都，我这让给现在这边什么处理就等于行了吧？我这这个在上当写出来没吧？实际的印度没想到就俺等过多，实际的印度，好的，你既往的写为新国用过的，刚才现在我所说的对为新国用过了吧？是新国写的，但写些呢苏北的些呢，这现在就俺了等人做关系，真正因为印度山呢。다 렌저 차시차에 남샤디디 신고 차용한 인도산에 다디 아니 디식베 숭르 이지체네 그다 아니 숭르 이치베 다 대베타네 아니 두부야레스 제네 다 원도 주야 탑지 대바송도와就是대바디 찍고 계지 말에 다 간다 원도 주지기 탑 때문에 아니 덤버볼이야 다 참여 기불러 지기 다 내가 타바체네 다 대라야 아니 제가 숨고 타고 쓰도와 롱대야特别 송송 교제도 제가 있는 가설로 보는 시리 아니 롱송진이 다자 두고 말이 리벌 때 거죠 봐 그래서 근데 인도 신고 때문에 롱대 아니 제가 숨이 타고 왔어 아다 통문주 때문에 차라 무슨 사면 넣어 봐 중세 고주 때문에 차라 제바가 넣어 봐 아니 시도 고주 때문에 차라 아니 뭐지 자 이지지바 너만 봤으니까 뭐지 무슈 야마 붙이 고요하래 질 강사대 줌미셔봐 통문주 때문에 차라 뭐냐 자네게 배 줌전 때문에 지겠다 대세경에 미치 texte sont ya que tu me ba ta tinde ji to ne ta ta da chamala no ba sa de te di jumni tinde ki to ne mari bo sa di kada chi lo lo yin ba ta tel ni bo tom de yo ba ta de ba kom na sem ge yan de ani kum sin be ju chamala me de ba tinde ki to ne ta jumni de ka sa mo ji lo yin ba shi xin do da di shi we ning bu do sin tinde shi ba na shi ri ta tinde ki to ne ani kada 지금 조요통의 밀리실 샤나 주스 바고 있었다. 참아 넘는 수나 되더라고. 그래서 되게 돈에 아니 어다 가다 지 신고 때문에 아니 슝대 무슨 갑에 버지다. 뒷땡겐 게 덤바디 세마지 봐. 뒷 세마임바디 중세 고주 내리 주베 탑주디 송샤바디 리베 좀전 남다 거야 여대봤다. 내가 톱쳐야 여버지. 때 인도산에 다 나라도 신도 꺼도 기베트 대박한 거 송셔버디 다 패지 로요 말에 있으네 다 도스니 이지야지 송도와 그래서 인도 너는 대유 주번 너도는 너는 대다 싫어보 세 맞아 써야 되리샤 싫어 된시 양다리 싫어 더 덴버티기 양타워디 이루 테코나니 아니 리광 셰버진 거레스 니니 조 싫어데스 조 싫어버려. 대화 영향고에 균선 잡아채네. 통유 때문에 차. 중세고유 때문에 차를 이렇게 째. 아니 밀로지 통의 용도 아니 신고 때문에 차래. 아니 신의 이질이야 저기. 용구가 이러잖아요. 또 싫어버려. 대응으로 대화 인스타. 싫어겠다. 지금 땅으로 대화해야 돼. 패지 디자초고 매도 섬기. 싫어 쏘대. 때는다고 띵중 시베 싫어지. 때는다고 띵중 시베 싫어 대 영화라야 균적이 띵중을 그게 내가 터지 거 봐. 저 진짜 인도 균적이 띵중 차시 차와데 패지 대화된 저 이도 소시도가. 그래서 진짜 인도 대응으로 대화인스. 다들 눈다 시단 지고다 몽배 컨시 최면다와 되는 대화 전시자스니. 소수 룩 띵아랑 그 룩이 인생의 상과체제. 될이야 잡아게 마셔서 상과체는 줘야지 두배 좋아서. 양 차단선에 미거워체는 되게 돈에 세대야지 시장은 좋아. 다 직변 좋아. 전 두배 좋아. 시장은 좋아. 직변 좋아. 몽변 좋아서네. 가서 우리 그게 가서 되면 지사네. 좋아나 봐시스. 어떤 좋아나 봐시디기 뭔지 그래. 단 좋아나 봐시면 봐. 간다베 균전 딱제체니 잡아체니 균전 대버지 캬랑에. 뒤에 로술 대베톤에 딱제칭에. 근데 이르잖아요. 균도 시단 지고당 몽배 컨시 최면다와 되는 대바 전시자스. never level no showing. What is it?
So he's always covered verses 3 or 2 through to the end of the 6th. So it's important for us to understand, and when you follow the Buddha Dharma, it's important for us to really have a good understanding of the teaching of the Buddha himself, and then on the basis of this knowledge of the teaching, then when we follow the teaching, it would be very fruitful and significant for us to follow the teaching of the Buddha, and it should not be based merely on faith alone. And therefore, otherwise, sometimes what happens is during some teachings, the teachers would say, teach their audience that if you do not follow such and such teachings, if you do a sin, if you commit sin, then you would go to hell and so forth. And then, it's almost like frightening people to follow the teaching of the Buddha. That should not be the case, actually. People should not follow out of fear, but through understanding and knowledge of the teaching of the Buddha. There is a story here, I usually tell this in teachings and we call in different places. And so there was an abbot who had often monastery, and some visitors came, and then they asked to see the abbot, and the attendant said, the abbot is not here, and the visitors asked where he had gone, and the attendant of the abbot said the abbot had gone to scare the elderly people in the town. And so it's as if saying, he was indicating that what the teachers usually do when they give teachings, frightening people by saying, if you don't follow such and such Lama, if you don't keep your faith in such and such Lama, when your Lamas, then you will go to hell and so forth. Should not be that way, but we have to actually make people understand, introduce the teaching of the Buddha by making them understand what nirvana is, how to attain the nirvana by practicing the three trainings, such as the training of morality, concentration, and wisdom. And of course, when it comes to reaching nirvana or the liberation through these trainings, it will not happen. The goal will not happen just in this life itself, and therefore we need to think in terms of life after life, practicing. Doing practices life after life, and therefore it takes many lives to reach that goal. And therefore, in order to be able to practice the three trainings, morality, on the basis of which we need the understanding of the concentration and called the understanding of emptiness, selflessness, and so forth. For the third, especially, we need intelligence and wisdom that we should develop, understanding selflessness. And that can only happen when you have a human life, and not on the basis of an animal body or some other unfortunate ram. And therefore, we need to think about a long-term project of reaching nirvana by attaining higher rebirth in the next life, as the text says. And, O King, I will explain practices solely virtuous to generate in you the dharma. For the practices will be established in a vessel of the excellent doctrine. And in one whose first practices high status and definite goodness arises. And for having attained high status, one comes gradually to a definite goodness. And so what this show is the twofold project. First is to reach higher rebirth, and then the next step is to reach this definite goodness or highest excellence. And therefore, this can be done in order to reach higher status or higher rebirth in the next life. What we need is the understanding mainly of the law of causality. On the basis of the understanding of law of causality, then what we would do is avoid the negative actions, such as the 10 non-virtuous actions, for example, karmic actions, that lead us to the lower realms of existence. And by avoiding them, what we need is to develop or cultivate the 10 virtuous actions as opposed to the 10 non-virtuous. And through this karmic karma, we would lead ourselves to higher rebirth. Of course, when it comes to understanding the causality, the very subtle, the subtlest aspect of it is obscure to us. And therefore, in order to have faith in this subtlest aspect of the karmic causality, what we need is how we need to keep believe in the teaching of the Buddha is by finding that whatever he has taught is not inconsistent when it comes to teaching about the three topics or the three subjects, such as what is obvious and manifest for us in terms of teaching about the manifest things, the obvious things, that the Buddha is an authoritative and an authority, and also by understanding that by teaching things which are slightly obscure to us, but we can come to the conclusion through inferential cognition by using logic and reason. I mean, in that case, also the Buddha is not infallible, and therefore, through this, I mean, when because the Buddha, in terms of teaching the very subtle karmic workings of karmic causality, cannot be infallible, cannot be fallible, and then we can find that he is a reliable person in terms of showing the very subtle aspect of the karma as well. And so in this way, we can develop our faith in the Buddha, and therefore faith in the Buddha's teaching of attaining higher rebirth can be developed in us. And but then not only resorting to scriptural quotations, but just saying that, oh, the Buddha has said so, but then the Buddha himself putting himself under the rigors of the analytical lens, then we should also see that the Buddha has no contradiction or inconsistency in teaching these three things, and that he has no reason to lie to us with regard to teaching about what is obvious and slightly obscure to us, and therefore, I mean, we cannot find any contradiction in his teaching of the subtle workings. I mean, the very obscure, the extremely obscure matters that are not yet accessible to us either through obvious, perceptions and as well as the normal logical procedure of inferential cognition that pertains to the slightly obscure things. And so in this way, then we can find the Buddha to be someone who is without any contradiction in terms of teaching the three topics, giving teachings on the three topics, and then that he is someone who gives teaching without any with authority. And so we develop faith and wisdom, and faith in the teaching of the Buddha, and also we need wisdom or intelligence to see the differences and what is right and wrong and so forth. And so the text says, due to having faith, one relies on practices. Due to having wisdom, one truly knows. Of these two, wisdom is chief. Faith is its prerequisite. And so wisdom is its chief means that wisdom, mainly wisdom, understanding the dependent nature of things. Dependent nature and more precisely, dependent origination in terms of how things are merely designated through our language and conceptions. And for that, of course, we need to also develop insight into the law of causality as well. And therefore, it goes on to say, one who does not neglect the practices through desire, hatred, fear, or bewilderment is known as one with faith, one of faith. And so these four factors, which are also known as the four ways of how we go about with the practices, we should not have attachment to the practices or the teachings and so forth, and nor should we develop hatred when we come across something that doesn't make us unpleasant. Nor should we follow the teaching with fear or bewilderment.
So at the beginning, I would like to take some questions, perhaps 15, 20 minutes, some questions.
दोपहर का जो सत्र
And so we should follow the teaching of the Buddha with reason and logic. These are